Virgin secretary surprisingly got pregnant with triplets after one night of intimacy with wealthy CEO. Victoria's composure finally slipped. Just for a second, but enough for the sharks in Armani suits to smell blood in the water. Her engagement ring, a rock the size of Texas that had graced magazine covers, suddenly felt heavy on her finger. Have you ever kept a secret so big it felt like carrying dynamite? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. She walked into the most powerful room in Manhattan, holding 3 secrets that could topple an empire. The crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across designer gowns and tailored suits, but every eye in the ballroom fixed on the woman in a simple black dress whose children had just stopped conversations worth billions. Daniel Whitmore's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, crystal exploding against marble as 3 dark-haired toddlers clutched their mother's hands and stared up at a room full of strangers. What would you do if one night changed the course of 3 lives forever? Have you ever kept a secret so big it felt like carrying dynamite? Tonight, every choice Alicia made for 18 months was about to explode. But the real question isn't what she's hiding. It's what his family buried decades ago. The whispers started immediately. Wall Street wolves circled like predators sensing weakness, their phones already buzzing with text messages that would hit social media before dessert arrived. Daniel stood frozen beside his fiancée Victoria, whose smile could have cut glass as cameras flashed around them. Daniel. Victoria's voice carried that sweet Texas drawl that usually charmed investors, but now sounded sharp as broken bottles. Aren't you going to introduce me to your guests? But Alicia's response made the room go silent. He can't introduce what he's never met. The words hit harder than any corporate takeover announcement. 3 18-month-old children with Daniel's dark eyes and stubborn chin stood in a room worth more than small countries. Completely unaware they'd just changed the balance of power in Manhattan's most ruthless family. Victoria Blackwood hadn't built an oil empire by backing down from fights. Her perfectly manicured fingers tightened around her clutch purse, but her smile never wavered. "How interesting," she said, voice carrying across the sudden quiet. "And you are?" Alicia Turner. The name fell like a stone into still water, creating ripples that would reach every corner of New York's elite circles before midnight. "I used to work for Daniel. Before. Such a simple word to describe the night that destroyed everything they thought they knew about themselves. Daniel finally found his voice, though it came out rougher than his usual boardroom confidence. "Alicia disappeared over a year ago. I had no idea she was." His eyes dropped to the children, and something cracked in his expression. "I had no idea." The photographer from Manhattan Society magazine raised her camera, but Daniel's security moved faster, blocking the shot. Too late. Cell phones captured everything from a dozen angles, already uploading to platforms that would make this the biggest scandal since the last political sex tape. Daddy, the smallest child, a little girl with curls that defied gravity, tugged on Daniel's expensive pants. The word echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. Victoria's composure finally slipped. Just for a second, but enough for the sharks in Armani suits to smell blood in the water. Her engagement ring, a rock the size of Texas that had graced magazine covers, suddenly felt heavy on her finger. Daniel knelt down, his hands shaking as he reached toward the children. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. 3 perfect copies of himself at that age, staring back with curious eyes that held no judgment, no agenda, just innocent wonder at the glittering world around them. "Were their names?" he whispered. "Marcus, Maya, and Michael." Alicia's voice carried strength that surprised everyone, including herself. "They're yours, Daniel. All of them." The envelope in her purse felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Inside, documents that would prove these children weren't just his biological heirs. They were his legal salvation. But first, she had to survive the storm she'd just created. Security moved to escort them toward a private room, but Victoria stepped forward, her smile returning with calculated precision. "Wait." She looked directly at Alicia, Two women, sizing each other up across a battlefield littered with broken champagne glasses and shattered expectations. If these are Daniel's children, then we have a lot to discuss. The crowd pressed closer, sensing drama better than any soap opera. Phones recorded everything, capturing the moment when Manhattan's most eligible bachelor discovered he was a father of triplets with a woman who'd vanished without explanation. "Not here," Daniel said, finally taking control. His voice carried the authority that built empires and crushed competitors. "Everyone out, now." But the damage was done. By tomorrow morning, every newspaper in the country would carry the story. Stock prices would fluctuate, lawyers would sharpen their knives, and 3 innocent children would become pawns in a game they never asked to play. As the ballroom cleared, leaving only the key players in this unfolding drama, Alicia pulled the envelope from her purse. "There's more, Daniel. Your father's will has a clause you never knew about. These children." She paused, watching recognition dawn in his eyes. "They're not just your heirs. According to your family trust, they're the only way you keep control of everything." Victoria's face went pale beneath her perfect makeup. "What kind of clause?" "The kind that requires legitimate heirs to maintain control of the Whitmore fortune." Alicia's words fell like dominoes, each one toppling assumptions and changing the game entirely. "Your father suspected you might have children someday. He made provisions." Daniel stood slowly, his world reshaping itself with each revelation. "How do you know about the trust?" "Because your father's lawyers found me 6 months ago. They've been waiting." She looked at the 3 toddlers who were starting to get fussy in the strange environment. "They've been waiting for the right moment to change everything." The ballroom that had hosted Manhattan's elite now held only the remnants of shattered lives and rewritten futures. Tomorrow would bring lawyers, media storms, and battles that would make corporate wars look like playground fights. But tonight, 3 children who didn't know they were worth billions just wanted to go home. Follow this story if you've ever wondered what happens when the past refuses to stay buried. Like and subscribe. This gets wilder than anything you've seen on the evening news. The night everything changed started with a funeral and ended with a choice neither of them could take back. Daniel Whitmore stood in his corner office at 2 a.m., surrounded by condolence cards and legal documents that felt heavier than his grief. His corner office overlooked the city that never slept, but surrounded by memories of his mother and the weight of expectations. He looked more lost than any soul wandering the streets below. Alicia knocked softly on the door, balancing coffee and tissues she'd grabbed from the break room. She'd worked for Whitmore Enterprises for 8 months, invisible among the sharks in expensive suits, but tonight felt different. Tonight, the most powerful man in Manhattan looked breakable. "Mr. Whitmore, I brought coffee. Thought you might." She stopped when she saw his face. Red-rimmed eyes, loosened tie, hair falling across his forehead like he was human instead of a walking stock ticker. "She's gone." The words came out broken. 30 years building this company, and she never got to see me settled. Never got to meet her grandchildren. He laughed bitterly. "Not that there's any chance of that now." Alicia set the coffee down carefully, her heart doing something strange in her chest. She'd watched him command boardrooms, destroy competitors, build empires with nothing but determination and ruthless intelligence. But right now, he just looked like a son missing his mother. "She knew you loved her," Alicia said quietly. "That matters more than grandchildren or wedding plans." "Does it?" He looked up at her then, really looked like he was seeing her for the first time in 8 months. "Victoria thinks I'm broken. Says I use work to avoid real relationships. Maybe she's right." Victoria, the oil heiress from Texas who wore designer dresses like armor and smiled for cameras while calculating the political advantage of every conversation. Alicia had seen her exactly 3 times, each visit leaving the office feeling colder somehow. "You're not broken," Alicia heard herself say. "You're just careful." Something shifted in the air between them. Maybe it was the late hour, maybe it was grief making them both reckless. But when their eyes met across the mahogany desk, 18 months of stolen glances finally ignited. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, but she didn't move away when he stood up. "Neither should I," he replied, but his feet carried him around the desk until they were close enough to share breath. Alicia. Her name sounded different in his voice. Not like a secretary or an employee, but like something precious. She'd never heard her own name sound so important. Drop a heart if you believe some moments are worth a lifetime of consequences. Because what happened next changed everything for three people who had no idea their lives were about to collide. I've never, she started to say, but he touched her face so gently she forgot how to form words. Never what? Heat flooded her cheeks. At 24, she was the only virgin in her college class, the only woman in New York who still believed in saving herself for something real. But standing in his office with city lights, painting them in gold and shadow, real felt like right now. I've never been with anyone, she whispered. The confession should have sent him running. Instead, his thumb traced her cheek like she was made of something precious. Are you sure about this? Because once we cross this line, she answered by standing on her tiptoes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss started soft, questioning, but 18 months of watching him from across offices and conference rooms poured into it. His hands tangled in her hair, hers fisted in his shirt, and suddenly the grief and loneliness that brought them together transformed into something desperate and necessary. Not here, he breathed against her mouth. His penthouse apartment was everything she expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern art, furniture that cost more than her yearly rent. But when he looked at her in the dim light from the city below, none of it mattered. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted, suddenly shy. Neither do I. His confession surprised them both. I've never been someone's first. They undressed each other slowly, learning the geography of want and trust. His hand shook as he touched her, reverent and careful, like he understood the gift she was giving him. When she gasped his name, arching beneath him, he whispered promises against her skin that felt like vows. You're perfect, he breathed, moving inside her with a gentleness that made her eyes water. God, Alicia, you're perfect. She gave him her first everything that night, not just her body, but her trust, her heart, her belief in magic. In return, he gave her tenderness she didn't know existed, passion that left them both shaking, and words of love he'd never said to anyone. They fell asleep tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers in her hair. For 6 hours, they lived in a world where differences in bank accounts and social status didn't matter, where grief transformed into hope, where two lonely people found something worth believing in. But morning brought reality crashing back. Victoria's voice in the hallway, talking to his doorman about wedding dress fittings. Alicia's phone buzzing with missed calls from her mother in Alabama. The weight of what they'd done settling between them like a third person in the bed. I have to go, Alicia whispered, already reaching for her clothes. Wait. Daniel caught her wrist, his eyes desperate. This doesn't have to be a mistake. We can figure this out. Victoria and I were not. You're getting married in 6 months. The words tasted like ash. To someone who actually belongs in your world. She dressed quickly, not looking at him because seeing the regret in his eyes would destroy what little composure she had left. At the door, she turned back once. Thank you, she said quietly, for making it beautiful. 3 weeks later, 2 pink lines stared back at her from pregnancy test, but Daniel was already picking wedding venues with Victoria. The fairy tale was over before it began. Have you ever had one perfect night that changed your entire life? Tell me in the comments what you would have done in her shoes. She vanished before dawn, taking only her dignity and leaving behind the one man who could have changed everything. Alicia Turner had exactly $47 in her checking account, a pregnancy that felt like carrying lightning, and a resignation letter that said nothing about the real reason she was running. Birmingham's summer heat wrapped around her like a blanket of regret as she sat in the free clinic, ultrasound images of 3 heartbeats reminding her that some secrets multiply. 3 babies, not one impossible situation, but 3 perfect reasons why she could never go back to New York. Triplets. Dr. Martinez smiled like this was good news instead of the end of Alicia's world. That's rare. About 1 in 10,000 pregnancies. You're very lucky. Lucky. That's what you called it when the man you loved was marrying someone else, while you carried his children in a state he'd probably never visit. Her mother, Rosa Turner, took the news with the calm that came from raising a daughter alone in Alabama's most stubborn town. Well, baby girl, looks like you're about to learn what I learned 25 years ago. Men make promises in the dark they forget in the daylight. He didn't make promises, Mama. But that was a lie. He'd whispered forever against her skin, painted pictures of a future that felt real in those 6 hours between midnight and dawn. Then why are you crying over someone who doesn't know these babies exist? Because telling him meant watching him choose duty over love. Because Victoria Blackwood's family owned half of Texas, and Alicia Turner owned nothing but pride and a secret that could destroy everything Daniel had worked to build. Her phone buzzed constantly those first weeks. Daniel's name lighting up the screen like a heartbeat she couldn't ignore. She changed her number, blocked his emails, disappeared so completely that even his private investigators came up empty for months. The pregnancy was hard. 3 babies fighting for space in a body barely big enough for one. Morning sickness that lasted all day. Swollen ankles and backaches that made sleep impossible. But the worst part was the dreams. Memories of his hands on her skin, his voice saying her name like a prayer. Have you ever had to choose between your heart and your survival? Tell me in the comments what you would have done. Because some decisions feel impossible until you're the one making them. You could tell him, her mother suggested during one of the sleepless nights when Alicia paced the small living room, hands pressed to her growing belly. Rich men take care of their responsibilities. I won't be his responsibility. The words came out sharper than she intended. These babies deserve better than a father who stayed out of obligation. But late at night, when the babies kicked and turned like they were dancing, she wondered if she was being noble or just afraid. Maybe Daniel would choose them. Maybe love was stronger than social expectations and family pressure. Then she'd remember Victoria's perfect smile, the wedding announcements already printed, the life he built that had no room for a secretary from Alabama who got pregnant from one night of grief and loneliness. The babies were born on a Tuesday in March, 3 perfect copies of their father staring up at her with dark eyes that held no judgment. Marcus came first, screaming his displeasure at the world. Maya followed quietly, already contemplating her surroundings with serious concentration. Michael arrived last, content to sleep through the chaos his siblings created. They look like him, Rosa whispered, holding Maya while Alicia nursed the boys. Every feature, they did. Daniel's stubborn chin, his thick dark hair, even the way Marcus scrunched his nose when he was thinking. 3 little mirrors reflecting a man who didn't even know they existed. The first year blurred together in a haze of diapers and sleepless nights. Alicia worked 3 jobs, morning shift at a diner, afternoon babysitting for neighbors, evening data entry she could do from home while the babies slept. Rosa helped when she could, but her arthritis was getting worse and 3 active toddlers were more than she could handle. Money stayed tight. The duplex on Magnolia Street wasn't much, but overflowed with finger paintings and building blocks, where 3 dark-haired toddlers turned chaos into love and made every day an adventure. They learned to walk by chasing each other around furniture. Their first words were mama and cookie and more. They had no idea their father was a billionaire who could have given them everything money could buy. But they had something better. A mother who chose them every single day, who read bedtime stories in different voices and kissed scraped knees and made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs on Sunday mornings. Still, Alicia lay awake some nights wondering if she'd stolen something from them. The right to know their father, private schools, and trust funds. A world bigger than Birmingham, Alabama. The letter arrived on a Thursday, 18 months after she'd walked out of Daniel's life. Not from him, but from a law firm in New York with a name that sounded expensive and important. Ms. Turner, we represent the estate of Daniel Whitmore Sr. Recent developments regarding his son's inheritance require your immediate attention. The attached documents will explain the urgency of this matter. Please contact us at your earliest convenience. Time is of the essence. Sincerely, Crawford, Mitchell and Associates. Inside the envelope, legal papers that made her hands shake. Daniel Sr.'s will contain a clause she'd never imagined, a requirement for legitimate heirs to maintain control of the family fortune. Her children weren't just Daniel's biological offspring. They were his legal salvation. The lawyer's phone number seemed to glow on the letterhead. One call could change everything, give her children the future they deserved. Force Daniel to face the consequences of that night 18 months ago, or destroy what little peace she'd built in Birmingham. Single parents, drop a comment about the hardest part of raising children alone. You're not invisible, and your struggles matter. As she stared at the documents spread across her kitchen table, the triplets played in the living room, their laughter echoing through the small house. They were happy, safe, loved, but they deserved more than happiness. They deserved their birthright. The lawyer's offer was simple: bring the children to New York, prove paternity, and secure their inheritance. But accepting meant facing Daniel and Victoria with the truth she'd hidden for 18 months. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I know what you're planning. Meet me first." Victoria Blackwood somehow knew she was coming. The game was about to begin, and Alicia was no longer sure she knew how to play. While Alicia struggled with midnight feedings in Alabama, Victoria Blackwood was planning the wedding of the century in Texas. The Blackwood Ranch stretched beyond horizons, where oil derricks dotted the landscape like mechanical prayers to a petroleum god, and Victoria ruled it all with designer boots and diamond determination. She stood in her walk-in closet, bigger than most people's apartments, selecting the perfect dress for another charity function. But her mind wasn't on fashion. It was on the private investigator's reports hidden in her jewelry safe. Daniel had been searching for his former secretary for over a year. That kind of obsession didn't come from losing good help. "Miss Victoria." Her assistant knocked softly. "Your daddy wants to see you in the study." Big Jim Blackwood didn't summon his daughter unless money or reputation was involved. Victoria found him behind his massive desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, a folder thick with documents spread before him. "Sit down, baby girl. We need to talk." Victoria had learned to read her father's moods like weather patterns. Today felt like a storm brewing on clear skies. "What's wrong?" "Your fiancé has been busy." He slid a photograph across the desk. Security footage of Daniel leaving his office building with a young woman, time-stamped showing the night his mother died. This was taken 18 months ago. The woman was pretty in that natural way Victoria had trained herself out of. No makeup, simple clothes, the kind of beauty that didn't require maintenance or strategy. But it was the way Daniel looked at her that made Victoria's chest tighten. Like she mattered. Who is she? Alicia Turner, former secretary, disappeared right after this photo was taken. Big Jim leaned back in his leather chair. "Now here's where it gets interesting. My sources say she's been living in Birmingham with 3 children. Triplets, all the right age." The words hit Victoria like ice water. She'd spent 2 years planning a future with Daniel, building strategic alliances between their families, positioning herself as the perfect wife for a man destined to run an empire. But if he had children with another woman, does Daniel know? Not yet, but he will soon. My question is, what are you going to do about it? Victoria stared at the photograph, her mind racing through possibilities and consequences. She'd built her life around becoming Mrs. Daniel Whitmore. Every charity board, every social connection, every carefully crafted public appearance had been designed to make her irreplaceable. Have you ever been in love with someone who is still searching for someone else? Share your story below, because sometimes the heart wants what it can't have, and sometimes what it can't have is the only thing worth wanting. "I'm going to meet her," Victoria said finally. Big Jim raised an eyebrow. "That's not what I expected you to say. Know your enemy, Daddy. You taught me that." She stood up, smoothing her skirt with hands that barely trembled. If this woman thinks she can walk back into Daniel's life with a handful of babies and destroy everything I've built, she's got another thing coming. But as she drove back to her penthouse in Dallas, Victoria's confidence cracked around the edges. The woman in the photograph looked at Daniel like he hung the moon. And from what she'd observed over 2 years of engagement, Daniel had never looked at Victoria that way. Their relationship was built on mutual benefit, shared goals, compatible lifestyles. Great sex, sure, but passion that burned bright and fast, leaving nothing but satisfied bodies and strategic conversations. Daniel was an incredible lover, attentive, skilled, generous with pleasure, but he never lost himself in it. Never whispered her name like a prayer or touched her like she might disappear. That night, she stood on her balcony overlooking the Dallas skyline, phone in hand, debating whether to call Daniel. Tell him what she knew. Force his hand before this other woman could make her move. Instead, she called her private investigator. I need everything you can find on Alicia Turner. Bank records, medical history, employment background. Everything. Ma'am, there might be some legal. I don't care about legal. I care about protecting my future husband from a woman who abandoned him and now wants back in because she smells money. The lie came out smooth as Texas honey, but it tasted bitter on her tongue. 2 days later, she had her answers. 3 children, all born on the same day. All with Daniel's dark eyes and stubborn chin, according to the investigators' photos. A woman working multiple jobs, living paycheck to paycheck, raising triplets in a duplex that needed repairs. Victoria had expected to feel vindicated. Instead, she felt something uncomfortably close to respect. Raising 3 children alone while working multiple jobs took strength she wasn't sure she possessed. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Missing you. Can't wait until the wedding. But she knew him well enough to recognize obligation disguised as affection. He was a good man who kept his promises, honored his commitments, protected the people in his orbit. He'd marry her because he'd said he would, build a life with her because it made sense. But he'd never love her the way he'd loved that secretary for one night 18 months ago. The realization should have made her angry. Instead, it made her sad in a way that surprised her. She'd built her entire identity around becoming Daniel's wife, but she'd never actually tried to win his heart. When was the last time you were completely honest with someone about your fears, about what you really wanted? Share your experience below, because sometimes the truth is the only thing that sets you free. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. The caller ID made her pulse quicken. Victoria? Daniel's voice sounded strained. I need to see you. Something's happened. Something I should have told you a long time ago. So he found out about the children. Victoria closed her eyes, calculating her next move. She could play the victim, the betrayed fiancé who deserved better. She could demand explanations and ultimatums. Or she could be the woman she trained herself to be. Strategic, calm, always 3 moves ahead of the game. I'll fly out tonight, she said. Whatever it is, we'll handle it together. Because if Daniel Whitmore thought some small-town secretary was going to waltz back into his life and claim everything Victoria had worked for, he was about to learn what Texas oil money could really do. But first, she had a meeting to arrange, woman to woman. Before Daniel could muddy the waters with guilt and misplaced nobility, she typed a text to the number her investigator had provided. I know what you're planning. Meet me first. The game was starting, and Victoria Blackwood had never lost a fight that mattered. Dead men tell no tales, unless they hide billion-dollar secrets in legal documents that surface at exactly the wrong moment. The law firm's mahogany conference room held secrets like a vault, where leather-bound documents contained more power than nuclear codes, and family trees became battle maps for the future of an empire. Daniel sat across from his father's oldest friend and lawyer, Harold Crawford, feeling like he was about to be read his own death sentence. The old man's hands shook slightly as he arranged papers that would change everything Daniel thought he knew about his inheritance. Your father was a complicated man, Daniel. Brilliant, ruthless, but also surprisingly sentimental about family legacy. Harold adjusted his glasses, squinting at documents that had been sealed for 5 years. He suspected you might have children someday. Children he'd never meet because of his own mistakes. What kind of mistakes? Daniel's voice came out rougher than he intended. His relationship with his father had been built on respect and fear in equal measure. But love? That was something they'd never figured out. The kind where you realize too late that building an empire means nothing if you have no one to leave it to who truly belongs to you. Harold pulled out a thick folder marked with Daniel's name. He changed his will 6 months before he died. Added provisions. Daniel's phone buzzed with another text from Victoria. She was flying in tonight, probably to discuss wedding details or charity commitments. Normal life continuing while his world prepared to shift off its axis. What kind of provisions? The Whitmore Family Trust, all $47 billion of it, has specific requirements for inheritance. Harold opened the folder, revealing pages of legal language that might as well have been written in ancient Greek. Your father believed that men who don't have families to protect become monsters. So he made sure you need legitimate heirs to maintain full control. The words hit Daniel like a punch to the chest. Legitimate heirs? Children born within marriage. Proof of stable family life. Commitment to continuing the Whitmore name through more than just business deals. Harold's expression softened slightly. He was trying to force you to find what made him happy in the end. Your mother, you, a reason to build something that lasts. Daniel thought about Victoria, their upcoming wedding, the life they planned that felt more like a merger than a marriage. Strategic, beneficial, comfortable. But not the kind of love that created families built on choice rather than convenience. What happens if I don't have legitimate heirs? Control of the company transfers to a board of trustees. You'd remain CEO, but major decisions would require approval from people who don't carry your name or share your vision. Harold leaned forward, his voice dropping. Your father spent 30 years building this empire. He wanted to make sure it stayed in family hands, not corporate committees. What's worse, discovering your father controlled your life in the grave, or realizing you might have lost everything that mattered? Let me know your thoughts, because sometimes the biggest prisons are built by people who love us. There's more. Harold pulled out another document, this one bearing official seals and signatures. Your father hired investigators to monitor your personal relationships, especially after your mother died. Daniel's blood went cold. He had me watched, only because he cared. He saw how grief changed you, how you threw yourself into work to avoid dealing with loss. He was worried you'd end up like him. Alone, rich, but empty. Harold slid a photograph across the table. Security footage of Daniel and Alicia leaving the office building together the night everything changed. He knew about Alicia. He knew you cared about her in a way you'd never cared about anyone else. The investigators reported that you searched for her for months after she disappeared. That kind of dedication wasn't lost on him. Daniel stared at the photograph, remembering that night with perfect clarity. The way Alicia looked at him like he mattered beyond his bank account. How she gave him her first everything without asking for anything in return. The morning he'd woken up alone, feeling more empty than he had since his mother's funeral. Did he know why she left? Harold's expression grew careful. The investigators lost track of her in Alabama, but there were reports, medical records that suggested she might have been pregnant when she disappeared. The room spun around Daniel. Pregnant. The word echoed in his head like a drumbeat, reshaping every assumption he'd made about Alicia's sudden disappearance. She hadn't left because she regretted their night together. She'd left because she was carrying his child. Where is she now? Birmingham, Alabama. Working multiple jobs, raising. Harold paused, checking his notes. 3 children. Triplets. All born at the right time to be yours. 3 children. Daniel's hands started shaking. He'd spent 18 months wondering what he'd done wrong, why she'd run from him like he was dangerous. But she hadn't been running from him. She'd been protecting children he didn't even know existed. Why are you telling me this now? Because she contacted us, the lawyers representing your father's estate. Harold pulled out a letter written on simple stationery, Alicia's familiar handwriting making Daniel's chest tight. She has legal questions about the children's inheritance rights. She wants money. She wants to know if her children have claim to their father's legacy. Harold's voice carried a respect that surprised Daniel. She's not asking for herself. She's asking for them. Daniel read the letter twice, hearing Alicia's voice in every carefully chosen word. She explained the situation without drama, asked legal questions without demands, signed her name without flourishes or manipulation. Just facts presented by a woman trying to do right by children who deserved more than she could give them alone. Have you ever made a decision that changed your life without realizing it? Tell me about those moments that define us, because sometimes the most important choices happen when we're not even paying attention. What do I do? What your father hoped you'd do. Choose family over fortune. Choose love over strategy. Harold gathered the papers, stacking them neatly. The trust can be yours, Daniel. All of it. But only if you prove you understand what your father learned too late. That empires without heirs are just expensive monuments to loneliness. Daniel's phone rang. Victoria's name flashed on the screen, but he let it go to voicemail. Everything he'd planned, every promise he'd made, every assumption about his future needed to be reconsidered. He had 3 children he'd never met with a woman he'd never stopped loving. And somewhere in Alabama, Alicia Turner was raising his heirs while working multiple jobs because he'd been too blind to see past his own grief. I need to see them. The children. All of them. Alicia. The kids. Daniel stood up, purpose replacing confusion for the first time in 18 months. I need to see what I've been missing. But as he walked out of the conference room, one question echoed in his mind. When Alicia saw him again, would she see the father of her children or the man who'd let her disappear without a fight? Tomorrow, he'd find out which mistake would be harder to forgive. 3 toddlers don't care that their father is a billionaire. They just want someone to read them bedtime stories and kiss their scraped knees. The duplex on Magnolia Street wasn't much, but it overflowed with finger paintings and building blocks, where 3 dark-haired toddlers turned chaos into love and made every day an adventure that no trust fund could buy. Alicia wiped syrup off Maya's face while Marcus threw Cheerios at Michael, who giggled like flying cereal was the funniest thing in the world. 18 months of single motherhood had taught her that surviving triplets required military-level planning, endless patience, and at least 6 cups of coffee before noon. Mama! Maya raised her arms, demanding attention with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted she was loved. In a minute, baby. Mama's got to clean up your brother's mess first. But she picked Maya up anyway, because 18 months had also taught her that toddler snuggles were worth more than clean kitchens. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Another text from a New York lawyer's, asking when she could travel for the paternity testing and legal consultations. The envelope with Daniel Sr.'s will documents sat on the kitchen table like a loaded gun, reminding her daily that her children's lives could change with one phone call. But change into what? A custody battle with a man who had unlimited resources and a fiancé who probably saw 3 toddlers as threats to her perfect life? Media attention that would turn her babies into headlines and tabloid photographs? Single parents drop a comment about the hardest part of raising children alone. You're not invisible, and your struggles matter more than you know. Mama Sad. Marcus climbed into her lap, his vocabulary limited, but his emotional intelligence scary accurate for an 18-month-old. No, baby. Mama's just thinking. She kissed his forehead, breathing in that perfect toddler smell of shampoo and innocence. What do you think about going on a trip? Airplane. Michael's eyes lit up with excitement. Maybe. Would you like that? 3 excited squeals answered her question. To them, travel meant adventure, not the potential destruction of the quiet life they'd built together. They didn't know their father's name or understand that their existence could unlock billions of dollars. They just knew Mama loved them. Grandma Rosa spoiled them with cookies, and their world was safe and predictable. Rosa Turner appeared in the kitchen doorway, moving slower these days, but still carrying herself with the dignity that had raised a daughter strong enough to handle anything life threw at her. You got more letters from those fancy lawyers. I know, Mama. You also got a visitor yesterday, while you were at work. Rosa's voice carried a warning that made Alicia look up from the children. Expensive car, expensive clothes, expensive attitude. Said her name was Victoria. Alicia's blood went cold. Victoria was here, sat on that couch right there, pretty as a picture and twice as sharp. Asked a lot of questions about you, about the babies, about what kind of life you're building here. Rosa poured herself coffee, her movements deliberate and calm. I didn't tell her much, but I got the feeling she already knew everything she came to find out. What did she want? To see her competition, I think. To figure out if you're a threat, or just some poor girl who got in over her head. Rosa sat down at the table, her arthritis making the movement careful and slow. She left this. A business card, cream-colored and expensive, with Victoria Blackwood's name embossed in gold. On the back, handwritten in perfect script. "We should talk before this gets complicated." Alicia stared at the card, imagining Daniel's fiancée in her small living room, judging the second-hand furniture and patched walls, calculating whether 3 children and their struggling mother were worth worrying about. "What did you think of her?" Alicia asked. "Smart, dangerous, but not mean exactly. More like scared." Rosa's observation surprised them both. She looked at those babies like they were puzzles she needed to solve. The front door opened, and Alicia's heart jumped until she realized it was just Mrs. Patterson from next door, returning the measuring cup she'd borrowed. At 18 months of hiding, every unexpected sound still made her nervous. "You can't keep living like this, baby girl." Rosa's voice was gentle but firm. "Looking over your shoulder, working yourself to death, pretending those children don't have a daddy who should be helping raise them. He doesn't know they exist, because you never told him." But now lawyers are involved, and fancy fiancés are showing up at her door. The secret's getting too big to keep. Have you ever had to be brave for someone else when you couldn't be brave for yourself? When did you discover what you were really made of? Share that moment with us. Maya fell asleep in Alicia's arms while the boys played with blocks on the floor, building towers they could knock down and rebuild endlessly. This was her world, small, manageable, safe. Everyone loved everyone. No one wanted anything except hugs and bedtime stories. And the biggest crisis was running out of goldfish crackers. But looking at her children, she saw Daniel's stubborn chin, his dark eyes, his hands that would someday build empires or cure diseases or write symphonies. They deserved more than her love, as fierce and complete as it was. They deserved their legacy. Her phone rang, the number unfamiliar but the area code unmistakably New York. "Ms. Turner? This is Harold Crawford from Crawford, Mitchell and Associates. I'm calling regarding Daniel Whitmore Jr.'s inheritance claim." Her heart stopped. "What about it?" "Mr. Whitmore has requested a meeting. He'd like to discuss the children's future, and he'd like to meet them. He's prepared to fly to Birmingham at your convenience." Daniel wanted to meet his children. After 18 months of silence, of letting her raise them alone while he planned weddings and built empires, he suddenly wanted to be a father. "Ms. Turner, are you there?" "I'm here." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "When?" "As soon as possible. The legal implications are time-sensitive, and frankly, Mr. Whitmore is quite eager to meet his children." His children, not the children or your alleged children. His children, like he'd already accepted the truth, already claimed them. "I'll call you back." She hung up before the lawyer could respond, staring at her phone like it might explode. "Mama?" Marcus looked up from his blocks, sensing her distress with that supernatural toddler intuition. "It's okay, baby. Everything's going to be okay." But as she looked around the small duplex that had been their sanctuary, she wondered if she was lying to her son or herself. Because in 48 hours, Daniel Whitmore would walk into their world, and nothing would ever be simple again. The lawyer's offer was simple: bring the children to New York, prove paternity, and secure their inheritance. But accepting meant facing Daniel and Victoria with the truth she'd hidden for 18 months. Tomorrow, she'd have to choose between the life she'd built and the future her children deserved. And for the first time in 18 months, she wasn't sure which choice would hurt more. She'd spent 18 months protecting her children from a world that would see them as pawns, until the day staying hidden became more dangerous than stepping into the light. The train to New York cut through landscapes like a movie reel, each mile taking her closer to a confrontation that would either destroy everything she'd built or give her children the future they deserved. Alicia stared out the window, watching small towns blur past while Marcus slept against her shoulder and Maya colored in a book balanced on Michael's lap. 3-car seats for suitcases and a diaper bag that contained everything they owned worth taking. Their entire world compressed into Amtrak's business class section, heading toward a city that felt like another planet. Her mother had driven them to the Birmingham station, Rose's goodbye hug lasting longer than usual. "You call me the minute anything feels wrong," she'd whispered. "Rich people play by different rules, and you got something they all want now." What they wanted was her children. Not because Daniel had suddenly developed paternal instincts, but because $47 billion required legitimate heirs to unlock. The lawyers had been clear about the stakes. Without provable children born in wedlock, Daniel would lose control of his family empire. But the marriage certificate from that Vegas chapel 18 months ago changed everything. They'd been drunk on grief and wine, making promises in whispers while city lights painted them in gold and shadow. She remembered fragments, his hand shaking as he slipped a convenience store ring on her finger, her saying yes to forever while knowing it could only last until morning. Well, have you had to be brave for someone else when you couldn't be brave for yourself? What did you discover what you were really made of? Share that moment with us, because sometimes courage looks like buying train tickets instead of running away. "Mama, hungry." Michael's voice interrupted her thoughts, bringing her back to the immediate needs of 3 toddlers who didn't understand that their lives were about to change forever. She pulled out goldfish crackers and juice boxes, the same snacks that had sustained them through 18 months of careful budgeting and strategic grocery shopping. But by tomorrow night, they might be eating in restaurants that cost more than her monthly rent, sleeping in rooms bigger than their entire duplex. The thought made her stomach twist with something that might have been fear or anticipation. She dreamed about seeing Daniel again, waking up with her heart racing and her body remembering things her mind tried to forget. But those dreams always ended the same way, with him walking away, choosing his perfect life over the complication she represented. Her phone buzzed with another text from Victoria. "Looking forward to meeting you properly. We have a lot to discuss." The woman who'd visited her mother had left an impression, beautiful, intelligent, dangerous in the way that came from never losing anything that mattered. Victoria Blackwood had spent 2 years planning to become Mrs. Daniel Whitmore, and 3 children with questionable legitimacy weren't going to derail her carefully constructed future without a fight. "Lady Pretty," Maya said, pointing to a magazine cover featuring a Texas socialite at some charity function. Not Victoria, but close enough, the kind of woman who belonged in Daniel's world, who understood the rules of high society and played them like instruments. "Yes, baby. Very pretty." Alicia smoothed Maya's dark curls, so like Daniel's hair when he'd woken up that morning 18 months ago, sleepy and confused and beautiful in the early light. The conductor announced they'd arrive in Penn Station in 30 minutes. 30 minutes until she faced the man who'd given her the best and worst night of her life. 30 minutes until her children met the father who could give them everything except the simple love they'd known so far. Marcus woke up cranky and demanding. Michael needed a diaper change, and Maya decided this was the perfect time to practice her limited vocabulary at maximum volume. Normal chaos that felt comforting in its predictability, even as her hands shook while she cleaned faces and gathered toys. "Mama's got it?" Marcus asked with that supernatural toddler intuition that saw straight through adult pretenses. "A little bit, baby, but excited too. We're going to meet some important people." "Daddy." The word came out hopeful and questioning, like he'd heard it in stories, but never really believed it applied to him. Her throat closed up. "Maybe, sweetheart. Maybe." The train slowed, city buildings rising around them like concrete mountains. Somewhere in those glass towers, Daniel was probably pacing his office, preparing for a meeting that would determine whether he kept his empire or lost everything his father had built. Somewhere else, Victoria was calculating strategies and potential outcomes, treating this like any other business negotiation. But for Alicia, this wasn't about money or power or legal inheritances. This was about 3 children who deserved to know their father, even if knowing him meant sharing them with a world that saw everything as transactions and leverage. As the train pulled into the station, her phone rang. Daniel's name on the caller ID made her heart stop. Alicia, his voice sounded different. Older, more uncertain than the confident CEO who'd commanded boardrooms and built empires. Are you here? Are they with you? We just arrived. I'm sending a car. Don't go anywhere. Don't talk to any reporters. Just wait for me, okay? The line went dead, leaving her staring at a phone that had just carried the voice she'd heard in dreams for 18 months. Tomorrow felt like a lifetime away, but it was starting right now, with 3 tired toddlers and a mother who'd finally stopped running from the truth. Manhattan waited outside those train doors, glittering with possibilities and dangers she couldn't predict. But for the first time since she'd left New York, Alicia Turner felt ready for whatever came next. Even if it destroyed everything she thought she knew about love, family, and the difference between what people deserved and what they could actually have. Victoria Blackwood didn't become an oil heiress by backing down from fights. She became one by controlling the battlefield before the war began. The Plaza Hotel's tea room buzzed with old money conversations, but their corner table crackled with the kind of tension that made crystal glasses sweat and waiters nervous. Alicia sat across from Daniel's fiancée, 3 toddlers coloring at a nearby table under the watchful eye of a babysitter Victoria had somehow arranged in the 20 minutes between phone call and meeting. Everything about the woman screamed wealth and strategy. From her perfectly styled hair to her designer shoes that probably cost more than Alicia's monthly rent. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," Victoria said, her Texas accent softened but not hidden. "I thought we should talk before things get complicated." Things were already complicated. 3 children who looked exactly like Daniel, a secret marriage that changed everything, and 2 women who both had claims on the same man's future. But Victoria's tone suggested she viewed this as a problem to be solved rather than a disaster to be survived. "You came to my house," Alicia said quietly. "Talk to my mother." "Why?" "Because I needed to understand who you are." Victoria stirred her tea with the kind of precise movements that spoke of endless etiquette lessons. "The reports told me facts. Single mother, working multiple jobs, raising triplets alone. But facts don't tell you whether someone's a threat or just someone caught in an impossible situation." "And what did you decide?" Victoria's smile was sharp enough to cut glass, but her eyes held something that might have been respect. "That you're exactly the kind of woman Daniel would fall in love with." The admission hung between them like a loaded weapon neither woman wanted to fire. Alicia felt heat creep up her neck, remembering the night Daniel had looked at her like she mattered more than empires and inheritances. Have you ever had to face the other woman and found she wasn't what you expected? Tell me about it, because sometimes the person you're supposed to hate is the only one who understands what you're going through. "You think this is about love?" Alicia asked. "Isn't it?" Victoria leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her teacup. "You didn't contact him for 18 months. Didn't ask for money, didn't demand recognition, didn't try to break up his engagement. That's not the behavior of a gold digger. That's the behavior of a woman protecting something precious. My children, your children with a man I'm supposed to marry in 3 months." Victoria's voice didn't waver, but something flickered in her expression. 3 children who, according to legal documents I've seen, have the power to make or break Daniel's entire inheritance. Maya looked up from her coloring book, dark eyes so like Daniel's that Victoria's breath caught. The child smiled and waved, innocent of the adult drama swirling around her existence. "They're beautiful," Victoria said softly. "They look just like him." "I know. Does he know? About them, I mean. Really know? Or just suspect?" Alicia watched Marcus help Michael reach a crayon, their automatic cooperation showing the bond that came from shared DNA and shared struggles. He knows they exist. He doesn't know them. That must hurt. Watching him discover he's been a father for 18 months without knowing it. The observation was too perceptive, cutting straight to the guilt Alicia carried like a stone in her chest. He was engaged, planning a wedding. I wasn't going to be the woman who destroyed that with an unwanted pregnancy. Unwanted by who? Victoria's question was quiet but pointed. By him, or by you? The question hit harder than Alicia expected. She'd spent 18 months telling herself she was protecting Daniel from scandal and obligation. But maybe she'd really been protecting herself from the possibility that even 3 children wouldn't be enough to make him choose her over the life he'd already planned. "You must hate me," Alicia said. "I should." Victoria's honesty was brutal and refreshing. "You slept with my fiancé, got pregnant with his children, and now you're back to claim everything I've worked 2 years to build. But you gave him something I never could." Victoria's composure cracked just enough to show the woman beneath the designer armor. "You gave him children he loves before he even meets them, and you gave him a night he still dreams about." The admission dropped between them like a stone into still water. Victoria knew Daniel dreamed about that night, which meant she'd watch him struggle with memories and regrets for 18 months while planning their perfect wedding. "How do you know about his dreams?" "Because I sleep next to him. Because I've watched him search for you, hire investigators, check every lead that might bring you back." Victoria's voice carried pain. She was trying to hide behind strategy and politeness. "He still calls her name in his sleep." The words hit Alicia like a physical blow. Daniel had been looking for her, dreaming about her, carrying the same memories that kept her awake on lonely nights in Birmingham. But he'd also been planning a wedding with a woman sitting across from her, living a life that had no room for secretaries from Alabama or the children they carried. "What do you want from me?" Alicia asked. "Honestly, I want you to disappear again. Take those beautiful children and go back to Alabama and let me marry the man I've built my entire future around." Victoria's smile was bitter now, acknowledging the impossibility of her own wishes. "But that's not going to happen, is it? The lawyers say the children have inheritance rights. That Daniel needs legitimate heirs to keep control of his family's company. And you have a marriage certificate from Vegas that makes those children legitimate." Victoria had clearly done her homework, which means I'm not just losing my fiancé. I'm losing him to his legal wife. The truth settled between them like a third person at the table. Alicia was already married to Daniel, had been for 18 months without either of them remembering clearly enough to count it as real. But legal was legal, and legitimate was legitimate, and 3 children with the right DNA and the right paperwork could change everything. "So what happens now?" Alicia asked. Victoria stood up, gathering her purse with the kind of controlled grace that came from a lifetime of never letting emotions show in public. "Now you go meet the father of your children, and I go figure out whether I'm fighting for the man I love or just the life I planned." She paused at the table where the triplets were coloring, kneeling down to their level with surprising gentleness. "You're going to meet your daddy today," she told them. Her voice warmed despite the pain in her eyes. "He's going to love you so much." As Victoria walked away, her final words drifted back like a promise or a threat. "He still calls your name in his sleep. Just remember that when he's looking at you like you hung the moon." Some of us have been waiting for that look for 2 years and never got it. Alicia sat alone with her children, watching Victoria disappear into Manhattan's crowd of beautiful, dangerous people. In 30 minutes, she'd faced Daniel for the first time since that morning 18 months ago when she'd left him sleeping and disappeared from his life. But now she knew something that changed everything. He'd never stopped looking for her. The question was whether finding her would save them both or destroy everything they built apart. 24 hours before the gala, Daniel Whitmore was about to learn that some ghosts come back with proof of life. His penthouse apartment felt like a museum of success, cold, perfect, and empty. Until 3 car seats in his foyer made it feel like home for the first time in years. Daniel stared at the woman who had vanished from his world 18 months ago. Alicia Martinez stood in his living room, no longer the quiet secretary who had brought him coffee and filed his papers. This woman had steel in her spine and fire in her dark eyes. "You can't just show up here," he said, his voice barely controlled. "You can't just walk back into my life with them." Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, 3 toddlers pressed tiny hands against the glass, leaving fingerprints on surfaces that had never seen children. Their laughter filled spaces that had only known silence. "I didn't want to come," Alicia replied, her chin raised. "But your father's lawyer made it clear I didn't have a choice." Daniel's jaw tightened. Even from the grave, his father controlled his life. So this is about money. The slap came so fast he barely saw her hand move. The sharp crack echoed through the apartment, and suddenly they were standing closer than they had in over a year. "Don't you dare," she whispered, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "Don't you dare make this about money when you're the one who was planning a wedding before my side of the bed was cold." Heat flashed between them like lightning. The same electricity that had pulled them together that grief-stricken night still crackled in the air. "You left me," he growled, backing her against the window. City lights framed her face like a halo. "You walked out without a word. You never asked me to stay," she whispered back, her voice breaking. "You were already picking out china patterns with your Texas princess." The fight ended when he kissed her. 18 months of anger and longing crashed together like storm waves. She tasted like memories and promises, like everything he'd tried to forget and couldn't. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer even as she pushed him away. This was wrong. She was engaged to Victoria. She was a single mother. They were strangers now, but her body remembered his touch. Her mouth opened under his light coming home, and when he pressed her against the cold glass, Manhattan glittering behind her, she didn't feel like a stranger at all. "Mama." They broke apart as 3-year-old Emma toddled over, her dark curls bouncing. She looked up at Daniel with eyes that mirrored his own. Daniel dropped to his knees, his breath catching. Up close, there was no denying what he saw. Emma had his eyes, Ethan had his stubborn chin, and little Sophia. Sophia had the same dimple that appeared when he smiled. "They're mine," he said, his voice hoarse with wonder. "They've always been yours," Alicia replied softly. "I never said they weren't." Emma reached out with chubby fingers, touching his face with the fearless curiosity of a child that didn't know about complicated adult emotions. "You're tall," she announced solemnly. Daniel laughed, the sound rough and unused. "You're beautiful." For the next hour, he sat on his imported Italian marble floor, building towers with blocks while 3 children climbed over him like he was playground equipment. Ethan showed him a toy truck. Sophia offered him her juice cup. Emma fell asleep against his shoulder. This was what he'd been missing. This was what all the board meetings and merger deals and business dinners couldn't give him. This was life. "We need DNA tests," he said finally, though his heart already knew the truth. Alicia's face hardened. "Fine, but I want something in return." "What?" "Promise me that no matter what happens tomorrow night, no matter what Victoria says or what the media does, you won't let them hurt my children." Her children, not theirs. The words cut deeper than he expected. "Our children," he corrected. "And yes, I promise." She studied his face, looking for lies, for weaknesses, for any sign that he would fail them the way she believed he had failed her. Morning light was filtering through the windows when she finally nodded. "The gala is in 18 hours. Are you ready for this?" Daniel looked at his children sleeping on his couch, their small bodies peaceful in a way that made his chest tight. Then he looked at their mother, still beautiful, still brave, still everything he'd lost and found again. "I've been ready for 18 months, he said. "I just didn't know it." The sound of a key turning in the lock made them both freeze. Victoria's voice drifted through the apartment, bright and sharp as breaking crystal. "Daniel?" "Darling, I brought coffee and croissants. We have so much to discuss before tonight." Victoria appeared in the living room doorway, her smile freezing as she took in the scene. Daniel on the floor with children. Alicia standing by the window, looking guilty and defiant at once. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. "Well," Victoria said finally, her voice smooth as poison honey. "This is unexpected." She walked further into the room, her heels clicking on the marble like a countdown. Her eyes cataloged everything. The toys, the juice cups, the way Daniel's hand instinctively moved to protect the sleeping child against his shoulder. "Ready for tonight, darling?" Victoria asked, her smile sharp as broken glass. "The whole world will be watching." Some revelations whisper, others detonate like social media dynamite in a room full of cameras and ambition. The Metropolitan Museum's Great Hall transformed into a battlefield disguised as elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow prisms across designer gowns and tailored suits. But every eye in the ballroom fixed on the woman in a simple black dress whose children had just stopped conversations worth billions. Alicia walked through the crowd like she owned the world, her chin high and her hand firmly gripping Emma's tiny fingers. Ethan and Sophia flanked her other side, their matching navy outfits making them look like small soldiers marching into war. Camera flashes created a strobe light hell as reporters sensed blood in the water, their questions slicing through champagne conversations like sharks circling wounded prey. Miss Martinez, is it true these children belong to Daniel Whitmore? How long have you been hiding them? What does Victoria Blackwood think about this scandal? The questions came like bullets, but Alicia never faltered. She'd spent 18 months preparing for this moment, even if she hadn't known it. Daniel appeared at her side, his presence commanding enough to part the crowd. His hand touched the small of her back, and she felt some of her courage return. No comment, he said firmly, his lawyer's training evident. This is a private family matter. But nothing stayed private in a room full of Manhattan's elite and their cell phone cameras. Already, hashtags were trending. Hashtag Whitmore heirs, hashtag secret babies, hashtag billionaire sandal. Victoria glided through the chaos with practiced grace, her smile never wavering even as her world crumbled in real time. She air-kissed society friends, posed for photos, and played the perfect fiancée while her heart shattered into expensive pieces. Victoria, darling, what do you think about Daniel's surprise family? I think children are a blessing, Victoria replied smoothly, though her knuckles were white around her champagne flute. Daniel will make a wonderful father. The words tasted like acid, but she'd been trained since birth to smile through disasters. Oil heiresses didn't cry in public. They regrouped, reassessed, and struck back when no one expected it. In the coat closet, hidden from cameras and curious eyes, Daniel pulled Alicia against him with desperate hands. I can't do this, she whispered against his mouth. They're looking at my children like they're curiosities in a zoo. Then we leave, he said, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Right now, we take them and go. You can't leave your own charity gala. Your reputation. I don't care about my reputation. His hands framed her face, forcing her to look at him. I care about you. About them. About us. The word us hung between them like a promise and a threat. There was no us as long as Victoria wore his ring. There was no us while lawyers circled like vultures. There was no us until he chose. A knock on the closet door made them spring apart. Daniel? Victoria's voice was carefully controlled. The auction is about to start. They need you on stage. They emerged from the closet like guilty teenagers, but Victoria's smile never flickered. If anything, it grew sharper. There you are, she said brightly. I was worried you'd gotten lost. On stage, Daniel stumbled through his speech about childhood literacy while three small faces watched from the audience. His prepared words about giving every child opportunities felt different when his own children were hearing them for the first time. Emma waved at him from Alicia's lap. Ethan clapped his hands when everyone else applauded. Sophia fell asleep against her mother's shoulder, exhausted by the lights and noise. The auction raised $3 million for literacy programs, but no one would remember that number. They'd remember the moment when Daniel's voice cracked as he said, "Every child deserves a chance to know their story." As the evening wound down, security prepared to escort them through the gauntlet of photographers waiting outside. The children were cranky and overwhelmed, and Emma had started crying. "Mama, I want to go home," she sobbed, her small arms wrapped around Alicia's neck. "Soon, baby," Alicia promised, but her own composure was starting to crack. That's when Victoria made her move. She approached them with the smile that had graced magazine covers and oil industry galas. Her diamond engagement ring caught the light like a weapon. "Daniel," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the marble hall. "Choose now. The cameras are rolling, and I won't be humiliated twice." The room went silent. Even the children stopped fussing, sensing the tension in the adult voices. Daniel looked at Victoria, who had been his future for 2 years. Then he looked at Alicia, who held his past and his children and possibly his heart. The cameras waited. The crowd held its breath. Social media suspended its judgment. "Victoria," Daniel said finally, his voice steady, "you deserve better than this." He slipped his hand into Alicia's, his fingers intertwining with hers. "I am sorry." Victoria's smile finally cracked. For just a moment, the mask slipped and raw pain showed through. Then she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. "Yes," she said quietly, "I do deserve better." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against marble like a funeral march. The crowd parted for her as she disappeared into the night with more dignity than most people managed on their best days. As security escorted them out, Alicia heard Victoria's final words echo in her mind. She'd won, but victory felt complicated when it came at the cost of another woman's dreams. Outside, Manhattan buzzed with the scandal. By morning, their faces would be on every gossip blog and society page from New York to Texas. The storm had only just begun. The morning after the storm, 3 adults had to figure out how to share 3 children and $1 billion legacy without destroying each other. The safe house felt like a fortress under siege, where childhood laughter echoed against bulletproof windows while adult conversations determined the future in hushed, urgent tones. Daniel's security team had moved them to a private residence in the Hamptons before dawn. The media circus outside his Manhattan penthouse made normal life impossible. Photographers camped on sidewalks. Reporters offered doorman bribes for information. Entertainment news shows dissected every photo from the gala like evidence in a murder trial. Inside the beach house, 3 toddlers remained blissfully unaware that their existence had triggered a media earthquake. They played with building blocks and demanded juice boxes while the adult world exploded around them. "Daddy Juice," Sophia announced, holding her sippy cup toward Daniel. The word hit him like a physical blow. Daddy. He'd imagined this moment for 18 months without knowing he was imagining it. Now, it was real, and it terrified him more than any hostile takeover or corporate lawsuit ever had. Alicia watched him with guarded eyes as he knelt beside their daughter. She'd been protecting these children alone for so long that sharing them felt dangerous. What if he disappeared again? What if he decided being a father was too complicated? The DNA results came back, Daniel's lawyer said, entering the room with official documents. Paternity confirmed on all 3 children. Relief and fear warred in Alicia's chest. Relief because now no one could question her children's legitimacy. Fear because now Daniel had legal rights she couldn't control. "What does this mean for the trust fund?" she asked. "Everything changes," the lawyer replied. "These children are legitimate heirs to the Whitmore fortune. The trust fund unlocks immediately. $14 billion. That's what her children had inherited by being born. The number was so large it felt meaningless, like trying to count stars. "I don't want their money," Alicia said quietly. "I want them to have normal lives." Daniel looked up from where Ethan was showing him a toy dinosaur. Normal isn't an option anymore. Not after last night. He was right. The photos were everywhere. Social media had turned her children into hashtags. Hashtag Whitmore heirs trended globally. Hashtag secret babies spawned conspiracy theories. Hashtag billionaire sandal dominated entertainment news. Her phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters, distant relatives who'd never shown interest before, and strangers offering congratulations or criticism with equal enthusiasm. "We need to discuss custody," Daniel's lawyer continued. "Legal guardianship, financial arrangements." "No lawyers," Alicia said firmly. "Not around the children." She gathered Emma, Ethan, and Sophia, leading them to the beach where they could build sandcastles while the adults destroyed each other with legal terminology. Through the windows, Daniel watched his children discover the ocean. Emma squealed as waves touched her toes. Ethan tried to catch seagulls. Sophia collected shells with the focused determination of a scientist. This was what he'd missed. First steps, first words, first everything. 18 months of bedtime stories and scraped knees and Christmas mornings. Gone forever. "I want joint custody," he said without turning from the window. She'll fight you on that, the lawyer warned. She's been their primary caregiver. Any court would side with the mother. Then I won't take it to court. Daniel's voice was quiet but certain. I'll earn it. Outside, Alicia helped Sophia build a sand fortress. The little girl's concentration reminded him of Alicia herself. Focused, determined, beautiful in her intensity. His phone rang. Victoria's name appeared on the screen. He almost didn't answer. After last night's public humiliation, he expected anger, threats, maybe a lawsuit. Instead, her voice was eerily calm. We need to talk, she said. Not about us. About them. An hour later, Victoria arrived at the safe house looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover despite the previous night's disaster. Her composure was perfect, her smile practiced, but Daniel caught the exhaustion in her eyes. I'm not here to fight, she announced, settling into an armchair like a queen holding court. I'm here to negotiate. Alicia tensed, instinctively protective. There's nothing to negotiate. They're my children. Our children, Daniel corrected automatically. And apparently, my problem, Victoria added with bitter humor. Do you have any idea what this scandal has done to my family's stock prices? The Blackwood oil empire had taken a hit. Victoria's association with the Whitmore scandal made investors nervous. Her engagement to Daniel had been as much about business merger as romance. I'm sorry, Daniel said, meaning it. Victoria studied him for a long moment. No, you're not. You're relieved. She looked out at the beach where the children played. They're beautiful, by the way. They have your eyes. The admission hung in the air like a white flag. What do you want, Victoria? I want to walk away with my dignity intact, she replied. I want a clean break. No messy court battles, no public blame games. You get your instant family, and I get to pretend this was my choice. It was a reasonable request from a woman who'd just lost everything she'd planned for. And in return, Alicia asked suspiciously. Victoria's smile turned genuine for the first time. In return, I don't make this ugly. I don't contest paternity or claim abandonment or turn this into a custody war. She stood, smoothing her skirt. But I have one condition. Daniel and Alicia waited. I want to be their godmother. The request was so unexpected that neither knew how to respond. I lost my chance at being their stepmother, Victoria continued. But those children are going to grow up in a world I understand better than anyone. They'll need someone who knows how to navigate society scandals and media attention. Someone who can teach them that money is a tool, not a master. It was an olive branch wrapped in practical wisdom. As Victoria walked back to her car, she paused at the beach where the children played. Emma looked up and waved with sandy fingers. Victoria waved back, and for just a moment, her practiced smile looked real. Some endings, Alicia realized, could become unexpected beginnings. Some people wake up in Vegas with regrets. They woke up with a secret that could legitimize an empire. The envelope Alicia had carried to the gala contained one more document that changed everything they thought they knew about that grief-stricken night 18 months ago. Daniel stared at the marriage certificate with his signature scrawled across official paper. The date made his heart stop. The same night his mother died. The same night he'd held Alicia in his office and let grief turn into something else entirely. We were married, he said, his voice hollow with shock. Apparently. Alicia's hands shook as she took the certificate back. I found it in my things when I was packing to come here. I don't remember any of it. The chapel security footage showed two people so lost in grief and wine they made promises in whispers. Their rings purchased from a convenience store, but their vows surprisingly real. They'd driven to Vegas in Daniel's car after the funeral reception, both of them too numb with loss to make rational decisions. His mother's death had hit him harder than expected. Alicia had stayed late to help with arrangements. Her quiet presence the only thing that made sense in a world gone sideways. We stopped at a gas station, Daniel said slowly, memory fragments surfacing like bubbles in champagne. You were crying because you never got to tell her goodbye. She hired me herself, Alicia whispered. Your mother. She said I reminded her of someone she used to know. The pieces clicked together like a puzzle they'd been solving their whole lives without knowing it. His mother had hired Alicia 6 months before her death. Had she suspected something? Had she seen what Daniel was too proud to acknowledge? That his secretary was more than just efficient? The Vegas chapel looked like a movie set designed by someone who'd never seen an actual wedding. Pink neon hearts, plastic flowers, and an Elvis impersonator who doubled as an ordained minister. But in the grainy security footage, their faces showed something real. Daniel's hand shook as he slipped a plastic ring onto Alicia's finger. She'd whispered vows they couldn't hear through the old speakers, but her eyes never left his face. "I remember the hotel room," Daniel admitted, heat flooding his cheeks. Alicia's breath caught. "Do you? You were so gentle with me. I was falling apart, and you just held me together." Their wedding night hadn't been about passion. It had been about comfort. Two lost souls finding shelter in each other's arms. She traced patterns on his chest while he slept, whispering promises in Spanish that he pretended not to understand. "Te amo," she'd said against his skin. "I love you." He pretended to be asleep because loving her felt too dangerous, too real, too far outside the life he'd planned. The next morning, they'd driven back to New York in hungover silence. By noon, his engagement to Victoria was front-page news in 3 newspapers. His father's business partners had arranged the marriage like a corporate merger. "You never said anything," Alicia said now, studying his face. "Neither did you. I was a secretary. You were about to marry an oil heiress. What was I supposed to say?" They'd buried that night so deep that alcohol and grief had erased most of it from memory. But the marriage certificate was real. The security footage was real. The plastic rings they'd lost or thrown away didn't matter because the vows had been legally binding. "This changes everything," Daniel's lawyer said when they showed him the document. "The children aren't just legitimate heirs. They're the product of a legal marriage. The trust fund, the inheritance, all of it becomes uncontestable." More importantly, it meant Victoria's engagement had been meaningless from the beginning. Daniel had never been free to marry her. He'd been Alicia's husband for 18 months without knowing it. "Why didn't you tell me you were pregnant?" Daniel asked later, when the lawyers had gone and the children were napping. They sat on the beach, watching waves erase the sandcastles Emma had built that morning. The metaphor felt too obvious to ignore. "I tried," Alicia replied. "I called your office today, I found out. Your assistant said you were in Texas with your fiancé, looking at wedding venues." The memory hit him like a slap. He remembered that trip. Victoria had been so excited, planning their future with military precision. He'd gone through the motions, pretending enthusiasm he didn't feel. "I would have come back. Would you?" Alicia's eyes searched his face. "Or would you have written me a check and asked me to disappear?" He wanted to protest, to claim he would have done the right thing. But 18 months ago, he'd been a different man. Colder, more concerned with appearances and family expectations than with love or truth. "I was a coward," he admitted. "We both were." The sun set over the Hamptons, painting the sky in shades of forgiveness. 3 children slept peacefully in a house that finally felt like home, unaware that their parents had spent 18 months living a lie. "So what now?" Alicia asked. Daniel took her hand, his thumb tracing the phantom line where a plastic wedding ring had once sat. "Now we figure out how to be married. For real this time." But before they could build their future, Victoria arrived with her own lawyer and a smile that promised war. "You may have been married first," she announced, stepping onto the beach like an avenging angel in designer heels. "But you abandoned him. That makes this interesting." The games weren't over. They were just beginning. In boardrooms and courtrooms, love becomes strategy and children become chess pieces, unless someone refuses to play the game. The conference room resembled a war room where legal documents became weapons and family photos turned into evidence of worthiness or failure. Victoria sat across from Daniel and Alicia like a general planning battle strategy. Her lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman who looked like she ate opposing counsel for breakfast, spread papers across the mahogany table like tarot cards predicting doom. "Abandonment is grounds for annulment," the lawyer explained, her voice crisp as winter air. Ms. Martinez left without notice, cut off all communication, and hid Mr. Whitmore's children for 18 months. That constitutes willful desertion of the marriage. We didn't know we were married, Alicia protested, but her voice sounded weak even to her own ears. Ignorance isn't a legal defense, Victoria replied with bitter satisfaction. You knew something happened in Vegas. You had his children. You chose to disappear. Daniel's hands clenched on the conference table. Victoria, this is insane. You can't annul my marriage just because you're angry. I'm not angry, darling. Victoria's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. I'm practical. The Blackwood family has invested 2 years and $50 million in our engagement. Your little Vegas mistake threatens very powerful business relationships. The truth crystallized like poison in champagne. This wasn't about love or heartbreak. This was about oil money and corporate alliances and deals made in boardrooms between men who treated marriages like mergers. The children complicate things, Victoria's lawyer continued. But if the marriage is annulled, paternity becomes a separate issue. Custody battles, child support negotiations, DNA disputes, all very messy and public. Emma's laughter drifted from the beach where she played with her siblings, oblivious to the adults deciding her fate like medieval kings dividing kingdoms. You're using my children as leverage, Alicia said, maternal fury making her voice shake. I'm protecting everyone's interests, Victoria corrected, including theirs. Do you really want them growing up in courtrooms? Do you want their childhood memories filled with custody battles and media circuses? The threat was clear. Fight this, and the children pay the price. Daniel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against polished floors. Get out. Excuse me. I said get out. You, your lawyer, all of it. Get out of my house. Victoria's composure cracked slightly. Daniel, be reasonable. Reasonable? His voice rose, 18 months of suppressed emotion finally erupting. You want to annul my marriage and use my children as bargaining chips, and you call that reasonable? He moved around the table until he towered over Victoria, his presence commanding in a way that reminded everyone why he'd built a billion-dollar empire before age 30. I don't care about your family's oil money. I don't care about business relationships or stock prices or whatever deals my father made with yours. I care about them. Through the windows, 3 small figures played in sand while waves whispered secrets to the shore. Those are my children, Daniel continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. That is my wife. And if you think I'm going to let you destroy my family to protect your ego, you don't know me at all. Victoria stood slowly, her mask of perfection finally slipping completely. Beneath the designer clothes and practiced smiles, she looked young and hurt and more human than she'd allowed herself to be in years. I loved you, she said quietly. Not your money, not your name, not the merger. I actually loved you. The admission hung in the air like a funeral bell. I know, Daniel replied, his anger fading into something that looked like grief. And you deserve better than someone who is already married to someone else, even if I didn't know it. Victoria's laugh sounded like breaking crystal. The great Daniel Whitmore, so drunk he married his secretary and forgot about it. Do you have any idea how that makes me look? Like someone who deserves a man who chooses her first, Alicia said unexpectedly. Not someone who settles for her, because his real choice disappeared. The two women looked at each other across the wreckage of their shared disaster. Victoria could destroy Alicia's marriage and take Daniel by force. Alicia could fight back and drag everyone through public humiliation, or they could find another way. What do you want? Alicia asked directly. Not the lawyers, not the business deals. What do you actually want? Victoria stared out at the ocean where Daniel was now, playing with his children, lifting Emma above his head while she squealed with joy. The scene looked like something from a family vacation commercial. Perfect and impossible, and everything Victoria had thought she was building with him. I want to stop pretending this was ever real, she said finally. I want to walk away before I completely lose myself in this disaster. She gathered her purse and papers, her movements precise and controlled. At the door, she paused. The annulment papers are withdrawn, she told her lawyer. File whatever needs to be filed to dissolve my engagement cleanly. Victoria, Daniel started. Don't. She held up one perfectly manicured hand. Just don't make me regret being decent about this. After she left, silence settled over the house like snow after a storm. Through the windows, children's laughter provided a soundtrack to new beginnings. Is it over? Alicia asked. Daniel pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her like shelter from every storm they'd weathered separately. The legal part is over, he said, pressing his lips to her hair. Everything else is just beginning. Outside, 3 children built castles in the sand, their future finally secure in ways that had nothing to do with trust funds or corporate empires. Love, it turned out, was the only inheritance that mattered. Sometimes the most powerful thing a billionaire can do is walk away from billions, especially when walking towards something worth infinitely more. The courtroom felt like a cathedral where oaths were sworn not to legal systems but to love, commitment, and the future of 3 dark-haired children who'd already changed the world. Judge Patricia Hernandez had seen every kind of family drama in her 30 years on the bench, but the Whitmore case was one for the history books. Billionaire heirs, secret marriages, hidden children, and enough media attention to power Times Square for a month. Mr. Whitmore, she said, looking over her glasses at Daniel. I understand you want to make a statement before we finalize these custody arrangements. Daniel stood, his hand briefly touching Alicia's shoulder for courage. In the gallery behind them, reporters waited with cameras and notebooks, ready to document whatever happened next. Your Honor, he began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to say. I'm formally requesting to dissolve the Whitmore Family Trust. The courtroom erupted. Lawyers whispered urgently to clients. Reporters frantically typed on phones. Even Judge Hernandez looked surprised. Mr. Whitmore, that trust is worth $14 billion. Are you certain you understand what you're doing? Completely certain. Daniel's voice carried clearly through the chaos. My children don't need billions to have good lives. They need parents who choose them over money, love over legacy, and family over financial empire. Alicia's breath caught. She'd expected him to fight for partial custody, maybe establish visitation schedules and support payments. She hadn't expected this. The trust fund had been his father's obsession, the culmination of 3 generations of Whitmore wealth accumulation. Daniel was throwing it away like yesterday's newspaper. Furthermore, Daniel continued, I'm transferring ownership of Whitmore Industries to my employees through a worker cooperative structure. The mansion will become a literacy center for underprivileged children. The art collection will be donated to public museums. Daniel, his corporate lawyer, hissed, You can't make these decisions without board approval. I'm the majority shareholder, Daniel replied calmly. I absolutely can make these decisions. Judge Hernandez called for order, but the courtroom continued buzzing with shocked whispers. In corporate Manhattan, what Daniel was proposing was either brilliant philanthropy or complete insanity. And what about your children's inheritance? The judge asked. They'll inherit something better than money, Daniel said, looking back at Alicia. They'll inherit the knowledge that their father chose love over fear. Alicia stood up, her heart hammering against her ribs. Your Honor, if I may, Ms. Whitmore. Yes, I understand you've legally been Mrs. Whitmore for 18 months. Please speak. I want to establish educational trust funds for the children. Not billions, just enough to ensure they can go to any college, pursue any dream, without financial pressure. Alicia's voice grew stronger as she spoke. I want them to know that money is a tool, not a master. That security comes from loving and being loved, not from bank accounts. She turned to face Daniel, her husband of 18 months who'd been a stranger until last week. And I want to build something new with their father. Not an empire, just a life. Daniel's eyes softened with something that looked suspiciously like tears. Is that a yes to my proposal? What proposal? Instead of answering, he dropped to one knee right there in the courtroom. Cameras flashed like paparazzi lightning as he pulled out a ring. Not the plastic convenience store band from Vegas, but a simple diamond solitaire that caught courtroom light like captured starfire. Alicia Martinez Whitmore, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. Will you marry me again? This time on purpose, with our children watching, surrounded by family and friends instead of strangers in Vegas. The courtroom held its breath. This wasn't just a marriage proposal. It was a declaration of war against everything his family had stood for, everything society expected from people like them. Are you sure? She whispered, dropping to her knees so they were eye level. You're giving up everything your family built, everything you worked for. I'm not giving it up, he said, sliding the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly. I'm trading it for something better, for bedtime stories and scraped knees and Christmas mornings. For fights over homework and pride at school plays and love that doesn't come with conditions. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes. They kissed in a courtroom full of strangers while cameras documented the moment a billionaire chose love over legacy. Judge Hernandez banged her gavel for order, but she was smiling. Well, she said when the chaos settled, I've never had anyone propose during custody proceedings, but I suppose these are extraordinary circumstances. Victoria, who'd been sitting in the back gallery, stood and began to clap. Slowly, others joined her until the entire courtroom was applauding. Even the reporters seemed moved by what they'd witnessed. Outside the courthouse, Manhattan buzzed with a different kind of energy. This wasn't scandal anymore. It was fairy tale. The billionaire who gave up his fortune for love. The single mother who'd raised his children in secret. The former fiancé who'd stepped aside with grace. As they walked down the courthouse steps, Daniel carried Sophia while Emma and Ethan held their parents' hands. Cameras captured every step, but this time the attention felt different. Warmer, like the city itself was celebrating their victory. So what now? Alicia asked as they climbed into the car that would take them home. Now we figure out how to be a family, Daniel replied, buckling Emma into her car seat. The hardest and best job in the world. Emma looked up at him with serious 3-year-old eyes. Daddy, are we rich? Daniel glanced at Alicia, both of them trying not to laugh. We're the richest people in the world, sweetheart. We have each other. Good, Emma announced with satisfied finality. Can we have ice cream? 2 years later, the woman who once hid in Alabama boardrooms now ran them, proving that sometimes the greatest inheritance is the courage to claim your worth. The beach house stretched toward endless horizons where 4 children played in sandcastles while 2 adults watched from a porch swing, building dreams from love instead of fear. Alicia's hand rested on her rounded belly, where baby number 4 grew strong and healthy. This pregnancy was different from the first. No hiding, no fear, no wondering if she'd raise this child alone. Daniel's hand covered hers, his wedding ring catching afternoon sunlight. This time, she whispered against his neck, we choose everything, the timing, the love, the future. Their second wedding had been everything Vegas wasn't, planned, public, and perfectly imperfect. Emma had dropped the rings. Ethan had announced loudly that he needed to use the bathroom during the vows. Sophia had fallen asleep in her flower girl dress. It was chaos and magic and exactly what family should be. Victoria had attended as their children's godmother, bringing ridiculously expensive presents and teaching 5-year-old Emma how to negotiate with paparazzi. The oil heiress had found love 6 months later with a marine biologist who studied ocean conservation. They'd bonded over saving the planet instead of drilling into it. Mama, look, Emma called from the beach, holding up a shell that sparkled with ocean secrets. It's beautiful like you. At 5, Emma was fearless and funny, with Daniel's stubborn chin and Alicia's generous heart. She planned to be a dinosaur scientist when she grew up, or maybe a princess who rode dinosaurs. Her ambitions changed daily, but her confidence never wavered. Ethan, quieter and more thoughtful, built elaborate sand cities while narrating the lives of their imaginary inhabitants. He had his father's mind for details and his mother's compassion for everyone around him. Sophia, the baby of the triplets, collected shells and stories with equal enthusiasm. She remembered everything, every bedtime tale, every song Alicia hummed, every promise Daniel made. She was their family historian at age 5. The Literacy Center is ahead of schedule, Daniel reported, scrolling through emails on his tablet. The former Whitmore mansion had been transformed into a reading sanctuary for children whose parents worked multiple jobs. They want you to speak at the grand opening next month. Alicia smiled. Mrs. Martinez, keynote speaker. My mother would have never believed it. Her mother lived with them now, helping with the children and filling their home with Spanish lullabies and stories from her own childhood in Mexico. She'd been suspicious of Daniel at first. What billionaire really gave up his fortune for love? But watching him change diapers and kiss scraped knees had convinced her that miracles happened when people chose courage over comfort. The worker cooperative that had replaced Whitmore Industries was thriving. Employees who'd once worked for salaries now owned shares in their success. Innovation flourished when people felt invested in outcomes rather than just paychecks. Daniel consulted with other companies considering similar transitions, proving that capitalism could have a conscience. Victoria called. Daniel mentioned casually. She's bringing someone to dinner Sunday. The marine biologist? Dr. James Chun. Apparently he's brilliant and makes her laugh. She wants our approval before things get serious. Alicia shook her head in amazement. 2 years ago, she'd seen Victoria as her enemy. Now she was family in the strange way that happens when shared trauma becomes shared wisdom. Victoria spoiled the children, offered business advice Alicia actually needed, and had become a sister she'd never expected. Mama, Daddy, come play. Sophia's voice carried across the sand. They joined their children at the water's edge, where waves erased footprints but left memories intact. Daniel lifted Emma onto his shoulders while Alicia helped Ethan search for perfect shells. Sophia collected everything. Broken pieces, smooth stones, bits of seaweed that sparkled with possibility. Why did you really give up the money? Alicia asked later, as they tucked 3 exhausted children into bed. It was a question she'd asked before, but his answer always revealed new layers of truth. Because keeping it would have meant raising our children to believe they were special because of what they owned rather than who they were, Daniel replied, smoothing Emma's hair back for her sleeping face. I wanted them to inherit courage instead of cash. And do you miss it? The power, the prestige. Daniel looked around their beach house, comfortable but not grand, filled with children's artwork and family photos rather than priceless antiques. Emma's soccer cleats sat by the front door. Ethan's library books covered the coffee table. Sophia's seashell collection lined the windowsills. I miss nothing, he said firmly. This is what success looks like. As they settled onto the porch swing, watching stars appear over endless ocean, Alicia felt the baby kick beneath her heart. This child would grow up knowing both parents from the beginning, surrounded by siblings who'd learned that family meant choosing each other every day. So what do you think? Can love really conquer all, or does it just make the conquering worthwhile? She asked, echoing word from their favorite movie. Daniel pulled her closer, his hand finding hers in the darkness. I think love doesn't conquer anything. It transforms everything. It turns secrets into stories, strangers into family, and fear into the kind of courage that builds legacies worth leaving. Inside the house, children dreamed of dinosaurs and castles and futures filled with infinite possibility. On the porch, parents planned bedtime stories and college funds and all the ordinary miracles that make life extraordinary. The heir apparent secret had become family truth, that the most powerful inheritance isn't money or property or even love itself. It's the courage to choose love over fear again and again, until choosing becomes as natural as breathing. And in the end, that's the only legacy that matters.